We're going to get the morning started with our very first segment. It's called Investing in Economic Equity. It's presented by PNC Bank. And to lead us in this conversation is Celiné Justice. She is the strategy lead for Pivotal Ventures, a Seattle-based company founded by Melinda French Gates as an accelerator for social progress in the U.S. through high-impact investments, partnerships, and advocacy. Will you please welcome Celiné to the stage?
Thank you, Joyce. What a pleasure it is to be here this morning, and I am so excited for this meeting of the minds that we're all about to experience. I have to begin by saying thank you to my dear friend and colleague, Nanette Sullivan, a Seattle sports commissioner, a grants manager extraordinaire, and the kind soul that provided myself and Pivotal Ventures, of which we have several of my wonderful colleagues here, the opportunity to be here. This morning is the kind of special gathering that allows us to really reflect on what we're doing across sectors to advance equity and to maximize our impact on people's lives. I am eager to learn more about what my fellow presenters are doing that's working, what we're missing, and most importantly, what's next. But first, a little more about the work that I do that brought me here today. As Joyce said, I work at Pivotal Ventures, an organization founded by Melinda French Gates with a mission of expanding equality and opportunity in the United States of America. A huge portion of this mission is around gender equity. We know that at our current rate of progress, it will take generations to reach an America where our daughters have the same rights and opportunities as our boys, where America's girls really do have a level playing field. And I'm guessing that everyone here would agree we shouldn't have to wait that long, which is why in 2019, Melinda made a $1 billion commitment towards expanding women's power and influence. Thank you. Like so many of you here today, I believe that we can't talk about women's power, though, without also talking about women's economic power. The gender pay gap gets a lot of attention, as it should. It's crazy that the highest paid player in the NBA makes 204 times more than the highest paid player in the WNBA. But women's economic power is also about so much more. It's about access to capital and the chance to start a business. It's about workplaces free of harassment and discrimination. And also, while I have been asked to speak to you all about women's economic equity all up, I'm going to be fully transparent with you. I am physically incapable of talking about this as a single issue subject. Incapable because that's not how I have experienced inequity personally or professionally. And it's not how most women of color experience inequity. At Pivotal Ventures, I am proud to lead a focus on centering women and girls of color, and I take that mandate very seriously. During the pandemic, we all read stories about how women shouldered the brunt of the shutdown. However, what got less attention was the fact that women of color disproportionately exited the workforce and paused their personal lives and careers to care for their families and communities. Women of color make up 40% of women in this country, and growing. If we do not take intentional action, we will lose out on the talents, the ideas, and the skills of an entire generation of leaders. So clearly there's a lot of work to do to create economic equity for all women in America. But our discussion today is not just going to be about the challenges. Gender equity is also a huge opportunity for women, for businesses, and for our country. And this year has been filled with examples. The roughly 10 million viewers who watched the LSU Lady Tigers win the NCAA women's basketball tournament. Growing sponsorship deals for women's sports. And research has found that if women's participation in the economy was the same as men's, it would add $28 trillion to the annual global GDP. So the data reinforces what we all know in our gut. When we invest in women, we all win. And with that, I'm excited to welcome my fellow panelists to the stage. Laura MacNeil from PNC Bank, Regional President of Washington State and West Coast Territory. Katie, thank you, Laura. Katie Postich, Senior Manager, Sports Marketing, the Coca-Cola Company. And Sharmila Swenson, VP of Public Affairs and Social Impact at Symetra. Thank you all for being here. So first, I want to learn a little more about each of you through a sports lens. All three of you played sports at one point. Laura, how did Title IX directly impact your relationship with sports?
So it started really early. My parents threw me in a swimming pool where Mark Spitz, a decorated Olympian, was doing swimming lessons at 6 months old. And I had the opportunity to play sports all through high school. Soccer was the one that really stuck with me, and my coach, Guido Regelbrug, who was also my French teacher, helped me get a scholarship to Vanderbilt University. They had Division I men's basketball, and so they needed to have a Division I women's sport, and it was soccer. So I was the beneficiary of a scholarship, Title IX scholarship. So direct impact.
Amazing, amazing. Katie, you are in the business of sports. How did rivalries and camaraderie as an athlete influence your career?
So I, too, played sports growing up. I started with gymnastics, but was never able to master a round off, so I ended gymnastics pretty quickly. Pivoted to basketball, loved the sport of basketball, and after too many knee injuries, pivoted to golf. But playing sports and being part of a team sport and being a part of an individual sport really got me into just the fascination in watching sports as well. And growing up in Atlanta and being in a very much a college sports environment, college football dominating the Southeast, I was fascinated and enthralled with watching sports and the rivalry and intensity. And while my friends in middle school were out going to the mall or going to get their nails done, I was sitting at home on Saturdays watching college football. So I realized early on I loved the game and I loved the fandom that occurred around sports. And actually in high school realized I wanted to be a part of this. I wanted to work behind the scenes and be a part of this amazing event going on and have an impact without fans or players really noticing that you were having an impact on the experience. Because the one thing that I always thought about with sports is the reason everyone's showing up, the reason they're buying tickets, the reason they're tuning in is the one thing that no one can control, and that's the outcome of the game. But you can control every other facet of that game day experience, and I wanted to be a part of it. So that's how my journey started in sports.
Very cool. And Sharmila, you have mentioned that culture more than gender influenced your sports experience. What did that teach you that you've taken into adulthood and your career?
Yeah, for me, I think it was a little bit of both, culture and gender. My parents were immigrants from India and Sri Lanka, and I will say that as a youngster, sports were kind of what they tended to think that was for kids, right? It was kind of the shenanigans that kids do. They play, and then they move on to more serious topics. And so for me, it was really, it was a fight to continue to play sports. And I grew up playing softball and soccer. And, I think the thing that I took out of sports, and like so many of us, right? Teamwork, self-confidence, building all of those skills that you need, self-discipline. But I think above and beyond that, I work in public policy and community engagement, and it was the opportunity to learn to advocate for myself. I had to advocate to continue to play the sport at home, to get my parents to support that. There's a lot of negotiation skills involved with that in order to continue to play that, I had to negotiate with my parents in order to let them continue to let me play through high school. And then I think, really finding my voice in that, right? I was, for me, when I started playing sports, 40 some years ago, there were gender issues, I think, in general about girls playing sports. It wasn't a complete norm at that point, and it was definitely not a cultural norm, right? I didn't have a lot of other South Asian girls my age that were playing sports, and I would often hear them comment that they thought it was great that I was playing through middle school and high school, because that's just not something that was normally done in my community. So I think it built a lot of the skills that I use today in my work.
That's great. Sharmila, investing in economic equity. Symetra is working to address systemic barriers and financial literacy. Can you expand on that work that you're doing?
Yeah. So at Symetra, we have a vision of creating a world where more people have access to economic freedom. That financial freedom really comes with the need to focus on economic barriers and inequity, as well as financial literacy. And it's not something that just not only supports our industry, but it supports the community well-being as a whole. And when we started to re-envision our community program a couple years ago, we knew that it would be based in diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was something that really melded with our company values. We also wanted to have a high impact. So we went from giving a little bit of money in a lot of places to really focusing our community programs and focusing in on women, youth, and underserved students specifically in the areas of housing, homelessness, and scholarship. And the key questions that we're asking nonprofits when we partner with them are, where are you as far as centering equity as an organization? Mm-hmm. What are you doing to lift up the experiences of your clients, the people with lived experiences, so that you are actually creating support services that really get to what they need? And then what are you doing on financial literacy? How can we engage and lean in and help you with financial literacy and financial education for the clients that you're trying to support? I think a great example of this has been some of our national partnerships that we've developed. There's an organization called the Coalition of 100 Black Women. They've got a fantastic program called Sisternomics. And we've been able to partner kind of all of our different community and public advocacy support elements into helping that organization. So we come in with some short-term grant funding because we want to help them fill the gaps for today. We couple that with our employees that are engaged and actually help start a local chapter here in Seattle. And then we're partnering with them on the advocacy piece of things, because if we don't focus on the advocacy space, then these issues will just continue to perpetuate. You really need to get at it from a policy and a systems perspective.
That's great. And you're also doing some of that work around financial literacy with young folks too, right? Through
Yep.
Treehouse, through your work on collegiate boards. Can you talk any more about that work?
Yeah, so I think you really need to focus on financial literacy and financial education across the spectrum. It is particularly important for young people, and we engage through a lot of different nonprofits in this space. We engage with our sports partnerships for a lot of the work with young people as well, but there are a number of kind of major factors that contribute to ongoing generational poverty, right? And when you have educational gaps, right? So educational attainment, is specifically a high school diploma, is one of those determinants. Putting off kids until after the age of 21. So if you can not have kids at a young age, that's a very important factor in, again, trying to get yourself to rise out of that generational poverty that you might find yourself in. And then the third being able to work full time, and hopefully for an employer that provides some benefits so that you can have some basic health care and those needs met, right? Mm-hmm. Those things, two of those three things really impact us at a young point in life, right? Are you going to graduate from high school and have a diploma, and then are you going to wait until a little bit older to have children? So if we're not getting to young people at a young age in order to have this conversation and talk about the real costs of these things, then that cycle of poverty just continues and continues. I think the other thing is, we really need a very, very broad approach to this. There are 23 states today that have a high school requirement around financial literacy. Only 23. Washington is not one of them, right? So if you don't have a family where you learn about these things, because it's a generational understanding of the importance of financing and investing and credit and what those things mean for you in the long run, if you don't have that family understanding and it doesn't get passed through generations, there's nowhere else you're getting that information, because you're not necessarily getting it at school. So very, very important topic, and important across the continuum as well as people get older as well.
And Katie, your work with Coca-Cola, NCAA is one of your clients. It is, of course, still evident that there are gaps in equitable facilities and resources in men's and women's collegiate sports. And so I know that Coca-Cola launched a Title IX Women's Sports Challenge last year to drive awareness, identify the needs of the students. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What did you learn from it?
Yes, so I think we all know in this room that last year Title IX celebrated its 50th anniversary, which was a groundbreaking accomplishment and one that, give a moment to Title IX. And as a longstanding partner of NCAA, we knew we wanted to do something to celebrate the moment. But in thinking through how we would celebrate that, it was how do we carry on for the next 50 years? How do we create more progress and more action to continue the work that needs to be done with women's collegiate sports? And as we were sitting around, we thought, well, we don't really know the exact answers or the problems to solve. So we first need to go to the source, and we need to ask questions about what are truly we know some or a lot of the inequities, but how do we actually find out what we can do that's tangible? So we created a survey, and we sent that out to our Coca-Cola partner universities and also to the NACDA convention to hear from alumni, to hear from athletic directors, to hear from admin on what do women's collegiate sports really need. And while we heard at the forefront was funding, number 2 and number 3 were interesting to me. Number 2 was having more awareness of their sporting events happening on campus, and number 3 was attendance. So we took that information and said, well, what can we do for number 2 and number 3 that will actually drive action and drive impact? So we formed the Women's Sports Amplification Challenge. As I mentioned before, everyone loves a good college rivalry. Everyone loves a little competition amongst universities. And we created this platform to promote attending women's sporting events on campus. We made it an inclusive event where we allowed any university, if they were part of the NCAA membership, if they were not part of the NCAA membership, if they were a Coca-Cola partner university or they weren't, anyone could raise their hand and participate. We created their framework for this challenge. We created all of the materials, the tools, the promotional elements to drive awareness on campus of these events happening, and then once they got to the games, to actually check in their attendance to show their support for their women's sports programs. The check-in that they did obviously helped with the university's ranking within our challenge, but then the fan also received a nice incentive as well with an Amazon gift card. So we also know college students need all the extra Amazon funding that they can get. So we made sure that we were incentivizing fans to show up and show out for their women's sports programs. And then at the last piece of it, we needed to make sure we were actually amplifying this. How could people find out about the challenge, not only with the university, but nationally? So we were very strategic with that. We partnered with Together, the women-owned social media platform, which I hope everyone knows about, and if you don't, go follow them on Instagram and TikTok. They were founded by Sue Bird, everyone here knows Sue Bird, Chloe Kim, Simone Manuel, and Alex Morgan. And by amplifying the program there, we brought awareness to what was happening on campuses, finding out if your university was participating, and going and showing up for women's sports. So it was that platform that we created, that it was to help promote and get that visibility to women's sports that has historically been lacking from a partnership lens. And we saw really great success with it. We had over 80 universities participate in the challenge. We had over 13,000 check-ins across the 3-month promotion of the program. And we had, what was very interesting for me, is we actually had our top 3 final ranking universities were all universities that were smaller student body base. We made sure it was a fair program. We made sure that if they had a smaller student body size or a smaller arena, that the ranking system was adequately ranking that, and not disproportionately helping the universities that have larger arenas or have more student body. And our top 3 schools were those smaller Division III or NAIA schools that ended up having the most fans show up. And then at the end of the program, and the really big full circle moment for us is that the top 3 ranked universities at the end of the program had custom content created and promoted on Together social media platforms, giving them the ability to get exposure to their university's programs and actually use it as a recruitment tool. That is their target audience of young, aspiring, athletic females who are interested in sport, to keep women's sports moving forward in the right direction. So when you ask about what did we really learn from it and what can we take away, my top 3 things were: first, ask the questions. Don't assume you have the answers. Find out from the source what women's sports actually needs. Make sure at the end of it you are amplifying women, you're amplifying their voice and making visibility of what they're doing on and off the field. And third is be strategic with how you're promoting it. Partner with the right partners like we did with Together, and make sure that you're paying it forward.
That's so great. I was going to say, I think asking the questions at the beginning is sometimes the part that folks skip over. That's so important if you're going to invest in equity, to actually find out what the folks that you're serving need and want. So I love that. One of the other things that that we were talking about before was you were telling me about an experience that was a teachable moment around March Madness, when as colleagues, when asking how we as colleagues, as a company, as a community can talk about economic equity. So can you tell that story here and tell us why do words and visuals matter? This is something also that Beth referenced, words matter.
Yes, and I know we actually highlighted the Women's March Madness tournament earlier, which is phenomenal. So as noted before, I lead our NCAA partnership at Coca-Cola. It's a long-standing 21-year partnership, and it promotes all 90 championships that NCAA orchestrates and operates for the greater good of student athletes. And we all know March Madness is a marquee event, and as we all saw from this past year, the women's tournament continues to be on the rise. But if we all kind of think through March Madness and we think about the promotion of it, it comes around early March, there's the excitement, there's I gotta get my bracket, I gotta get in my office bracket pool. And you think about the visuals that you see of March Madness, I think we all would sit around and say, I'm used to seeing a logo that is blue, black, and gray. It has those gray tick marks around the bottom, and it has those fun brackets around the side. Well, that logo only signifies the men's tournament. If you think about maybe watching ESPN and seeing some clips for the women's tournament, you see a different logo. It's blue, black, and orange. They have 2 very distinct logos, 2 rightfully so, have their own distinct moment in time for the tournament. But as a corporate partner and how we look to promote the tournament and to promote our partnership, historically and across the board, a lot of uses with the blue, black, and gray logo. When I came onto the team, and it was obviously very much on the heels of the 2021 tournament and what we know happened there, I wanted to make sure that equality was across the forefront of our partnership and of our promotion. And in speaking with the NCAA, I quickly learned that the black and white March Madness logo signifies both the men's and women's tournament. And it's a small pivot to use a different logo, but a pivot that means so much. And so what it told me was that I needed to go through and start educating our system and making sure everyone within the Coca-Cola family was aware of this and what we could do for our campaigns moving forward. And I'm very proud to say that as we go into the 2024 March Madness, all 3 of our lead brands promoting March Madness, Coca-Cola, Powerade, and Core Power, will be using the black and white logo to signify both the men's and women's tournament moving forward. So, knowledge is power.
That's really, really great. Okay, so we've heard a little bit about how Symetra invests in equity through financial literacy programs, how Coca-Cola is investing in equity at the collegiate sport level. Laura, yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
I want to talk to you a little bit because at the top, I alluded to the 2020 Economic World Forum Global Gender Gap Report, which stated that it will take 257 years for women to catch up to men economically if no action is taken. You identified access to credit and private equity as significant barriers that PNC is leaning in to address. How did that 2020 Global Gender Gap Report influence your next steps?
Yes, so at PNC, when we heard about this report in 2020, we started Project 257 to bring awareness around this and to really help women find access to capital. So many fewer women, I think it's less than 10% of private equity goes to women-owned companies. Mm-hmm. Women CEOs, there's a great group here locally called the Women's President's Organization, which is an international group, but they're just starting their 3rd chapter in Seattle, so we're supporting them here locally. But with this project, we decided we've got to do something. We've got to stand up, we've got to make sure people understand this, and we have to move forward. So we partnered with an organization called Corliss, which does crowdfunding interest-free loans for small businesses.
Great.
And we put activators in over 55 markets across the United States. And these activators actually go out and help find women-owned businesses that need access to capital. And so with that effort, over 25% of Corliss companies that are nominated each year for these interest-free loans are identified by a PNC banker, which is amazing. We also, the great thing about this is to raise money for these loans, it's by the activator's fee, which is $1,500. So PNC is paying those fees for our employees in all of these markets, but anyone can be an activator. So anyone that cares about women and wants to join Corliss can come in and be an activator and help recognize businesses to get these loans. And they might be $250,000, they might be a little bit more than that, but these are really for small businesses. And so with that, we're now down to 169 years in just 3 years. I know that's not a lot. We'd have to do more, but it's great that we're making progress.
Yeah, it's huge progress.
Yes.
And still, lots more to do. You're also addressing the education side of equity with your 5,000 Advocates program. Tell me a little bit more about that. What did the first phase of that initiative look like?
Yeah, so for over 20 years, PNC has had a women's business advocate program. And in fact, we added a minority business advocate program a few years ago. So
Great.
We're working on both sides of that, as you mentioned how important that is. So with this program, we have over 5,000 employees, men and women, that are trained in gender intelligence. So a woman is doing different things than men. One of women's largest handicaps is the fact that they do more of the work in the household than men by far, and they're not compensated for that. And you think about the time of caring for parents, of cooking meals, doing laundry, all those things. Largely, it's not universal. My husband's awesome; he does all that, but not everybody does. And so it's great that we can support women in other ways. And so all of these people from PNC have been trained. It's very extensive, and you actually have to put together a plan of how you're going to activate in your community and support women. So I mentioned the Women's President Organization that we support. We give them a space to meet when they need it. We help them get connected with others and advisors, etc. It's also a place, if we've got a website page, which I think they may be putting up here, but we, at PNC, if you just go to pnc.com women, you can find many resources, TED Talks, all these other things, oh, here we go, about connecting women and putting them in a better place to get the financial help that they need, to ask for loans, to get paired up with private equity, whatever it is that they need at that stage of their business. And so we've got lots of tools and resources we can share with you. So it's important for all of us to engage. And I've had so many wonderful, great male mentors through my career, men and women. And I think the most important thing that we can do, those of us that have benefited and done well and gotten to play sports, is help others do that. So I love all the programs we've been talking about and how women are getting more and more access to sports, which I think sports sets a background and a backdrop, gives you leadership skills, really helps you throughout your career. I know I'm a better team player, a better planner because of the experience I had playing team sports.
Yep. That's great. Katie, back to you. Later today, we're going to be hearing from NWSL Commissioner Berman, as well as Paranordic skier Aaron Martin. I'm very excited about this. Coca-Cola is a long-standing partner of both FIFA and the Olympics and Paralympics. How have your partnerships with those organizations evolved? And what was something you were excited to see come to fruition with the recent FIFA Women's World Cup?
Yeah. As mentioned, we have been longstanding partners of the IOC and with FIFA. And when I think first to the IOC, That's close to over a 100-year partnership with that organization. And we think about the games themselves and all of our Coca-Cola operating units working with individual countries such as the USOPP. Obviously, first and foremost, it's how do we elevate the actual games? How do we refresh fans? How are we making a difference during the impact of the games? But we also know that as Coca-Cola, we have an opportunity to amplify the athletes who are participating in the games. This is for some of them their one shot to make a name for themselves, to get that visibility, to also get substantial funding to help create and fund the rest of their sports career. So we at Coca-Cola feel very fortunate to be able to find ways to amplify those athletes' voice through our channels. And when I think about the Olympics that I had the privilege of being a part of, I carried the torch through with Tokyo 2020 after COVID. I think about our athlete partnerships. We had an athlete family of 16 athletes, and 9 of them were women. 2 of them were Paralympic athletes. And when I think about going into Paris 2024, we also have a strong set of athlete family of 13 athletes. 9 of those are also women. And I can proudly say that the face of our campaign going into Paris is with a top female athlete, because we recognize the importance of what women are doing on the field and making sure it's an even playing field of making sure we're focusing on who they are as a person and who they are as an athlete, and rewarding with that and the recognition. And then I think about FIFA World Cup, and off the heels of 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup, which broke so many records for the sport and for gender equality. And I look at what our operating unit in Australia and New Zealand did. What's remarkable is when they started planning for this event, they took it as, this is the biggest stage coming to our market. We need to have the largest and biggest end-to-end campaign that our region has ever done. So regardless that it was a women's versus a men's sporting event, they went all in and made sure that we showed up as a business, showed up to the society with sustainability measures, and showed up to the people of Australia and New Zealand. And it was also remarkable, they had their first inaugural DE&I summit at the FIFA Women's World Cup, the first inaugural that will move on to the future. So it was investing in the country and in the sport itself.
So cool, exciting stuff. Sharmila, I'm going to come back over to you because similar to Katie, you're in a role where you pay particular attention to words and how words matter regarding legislation. Can you tell us about some of the policies that people should be aware of that directly influence their economic well-being?
Yeah. Well, and I'll just say, first and foremost, it's important to be an advocate and to engage in the process, right? In the public dialogue on issues that you care about. You do not need to be an expert. You just need to share what's important to you, what's important to your family, and what your story is, right? But you do not need to be an expert in order to reach out to our elected officials, our wonderful elected officials over there that do thankless work often. So say thank you to them, but also reach out and tell them what you care about and what matters to you in your community. I think there are a lot of issues out there, especially for women these days. Healthcare is a huge, huge issue that is so important to women. Women's health is unique, and it's something that we all need to be paying attention to what is happening in the healthcare space for women. As a company, we've leaned in to advocate on expanding paid family medical leave, which is really important for men and women across the board. But it's an issue that we're very passionate about, and seeing that expansion. The wage gap and workforce issues extremely important as well. As a company, we are doing things internally to address the wage gap and to make sure that women are equally representative in spaces in leadership. But things like childcare, right? That is huge, huge workforce issue, and there is such a lack of childcare out there right now, and the people that are overwhelmingly impacted by that have been women, and we saw a huge exit from the workforce by women during the pandemic, and that is really continuing. So, huge issue to pay attention to. The other pieces that in the space that we operate are really on financial services and retirement opportunities. There have been a couple really great pieces of legislation passed in the last couple of years. Secure and Secure 2.0 that were federal level legislative items that we engaged in supporting, and there are a lot of provisions included there. But student loans are addressed in Secure 2.0. know, there are opportunities to change the portability of your savings accounts between employers, which has been a big barrier in the past for everybody that is interested in maybe pursuing a different job. That's been a big issue. And then on issues like being able to save for emergency funds within your retirement security account. So those are issues that important to us as a company to advocate for on behalf of customers in our communities, and important for you all to pay attention to as well.
Thank you, Sharmila. Laura, any final words as we begin to wrap up about other opportunities that the PNC is making available?
Yeah, so we invest a lot in our employees and how we have pathways for them to move from one job to another. 56% of our job openings were filled by internal people in an environment where we're expanding in the West, so we're having to hire some new people just to do that, although we have some great culture carriers out here. Our pay equity is very important. We have the EEO1 report that we put out annually, which gives very transparent information about the makeup of our workforce and pay. And we're proud to say that women are paid 99% of what men are for the same job. And
amazing.
Thank you. And people of color are paid 100%. So of what their counterparts are. So white non-minority counterparts. So it is. So we're making progress, and it's very important that we continue that work. I will also say that for me, mentorship, both internal and external. Last week, I got to go to Roosevelt High School and speak to the DECA class. It was over 50 young, bright minds that are learning business as youth, and they were so engaged and so interested in my path and what I'd done, and I just loved sharing with them. And so we can all continue to do that, whether it's in sports or whether it's in education. I think it's really, really important. So thanks for having us today. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And I think the big takeaway that I get from this panel is how many different ways there are to invest in economic equity. And I'm sure that if we look around the room, we could find 100 more, 800 more. So excited to continue these conversations with all of you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.